finally, this very old story, a legend collected by Lafcadio Hearn in the 1800s, published in his book, Gleanings in Buddha Fields, published about 1908, The Wave. Once in Japan, a long time ago, there was a small village by the sea, just 90 thatched houses nestled at the base of a mountain. The people there grew rice, and you could see the rice fields going up the side of the mountain like green terrace steps. And above those rice fields, a large temple where the people would worship. And above the temple, the largest house in the village. It belonged to an old man, Gohei Hamaguchi. He lived there with his grandson, Tada. Everybody called him Oji-san, which means grandfather, because they loved him so. He was the wealthiest man in the village and the head man of the village. He was wise. They would go to him with their problems, and he would help with advice and sometimes money. One fall day, Oji-san was standing on his outside veranda, and from that place he could look all the way down the mountain and see the whole village. First, his own rice fields. The rice had been cut and gathered into stacks at the end of every row. It had been a good harvest, such a good harvest that people were planning to celebrate that night with a festival. He could see the banners and the lanterns all hanging in readiness for the celebration. He could see the people's houses, the beach, and finally, the sea. The air was warm and strangely heavy. It was earthquake weather. And as Oji-san was standing on the veranda, he began to feel the slow shaking of an earthquake. Now, he was not alarmed. They lived through several earthquakes every year, but this one seemed different. The earth shook and stilled. And then he looked out to the water, to the ocean, and he saw something he'd never seen before. The water was moving in the wrong direction. The water was pulling away from the land. It looked like the water was running away from the land. The people in the village were starting to notice this strange sight. They were gathering on the beach, talking to each other, pointing out to sea. No one had ever seen this before. No one knew what it meant. But Oji-san, standing on that veranda, began to remember when he was a little boy, his grandfather telling him of the very same thing happening when he was a little boy. And Oji-san knew what was to come. It was great danger. But there was no time to run all the way down the side of the mountain to warn the people. There was no time to even get to the temple to ask the priest to ring the bell. He turned to his grandson. Tada, he said, "Light me a torch." The boy obeyed immediately, bringing him a lit pine torch. And the old man took the torch and ran down to the edge of his rice field. He hesitated for only a moment, looking at all his work for the past year, all his wealth. And then he raised the torch and lit the first rice stack. Immediately, it burst into flame, the black smoke billowing into the air. He did not hesitate, but ran to the second row and lit that stack, and then the third row. Tada ran beside him, crying, "Ji-chan, Ji-chan, what are you doing? What are you doing?" The old man didn't stop, just kept lighting row after row. Tada ran back to the house weeping. He thought his grandfather had gone crazy. When the old man had lit the last row, he dropped his torch. He went back to his veranda, and he waited. It was a priest at the temple who first saw the black smoke billowing into the air. Oji-san's rice fields are burning. We must help. And he began to ring the bell over and over and over until finally the people who were still standing on the beach, still staring out to the water, which was still pulling away from the land, at last the people turned and looked up the mountain and saw the black smoke. Oji-san's rice fields are burning. We must help. And they began to run up the side of the mountain, every man, woman, and child. For the old man was well loved. It was the young men and women who reached him first. "Water," they said. "Where's the water? We'll help you put out the fire." But he said, "No, let the fields burn." Let the fields burn? But why? There's great danger, he said. Everyone must come, everyone. And gradually they did all come, the children running up, the mothers with the babies upon their backs, and finally the old people leaning upon their canes. And when he saw that everyone was there, he said, yes, I lit my rice fields. Look to the sea. And everyone turned and looked at the water, which still pulled away from the land. And then, before their unbelieving eyes, the water rose up into a solid wall of water, high, higher, impossibly high. And that wall of water began to rush towards the shore, tsunami, the great wave. And that wall of water crashed upon the beach, and the wood from their houses flew in every direction. And then the water pulled back and once again rose up into a solid wall and rushed towards the shore and crashed upon the beach 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, but each time growing weaker and weaker until finally the water settled itself back in its ocean bed, dark and uneasy. And the people stared at the wreckage of their houses, at the beach where only moments before they had been standing. That, said Oji-san, that is why I burnt my rice fields. And one by one the people turned. And one by one they sank to their knees and bowed to the old man, once the wealthiest of them all, now a poor man, but he had saved 400 lives. Come, he said, my house still stands, and the temple too. There is room for many. Come. And he turned, and he led the way.